Namaskar. Welcome to Prakash on Basics. I'm Prakash Zog. Last time we'd seen how sound is produced. In fact, we talked of how humans produce sound. But then humans have been hearing sound for a long time, right from their birth. So how do we hear sound? How do we detect sound? That's what we'll talk of today. Hearing, or is it listening? And are they the same? The ability to detect sound energy, to sense the presence of sound energy, that is hearing. And carefully making sense out of this sound energy is what listening is. We have a sense organ that is associated with sound, and that is the pair of ears that we have. Sound energy in the form of longitudinal waves reaches our ears. This energy is interpreted with the help of two factors: the loudness of sound, which depends upon the size of the wave that is being produced, and the pitch of sound, which we typically refer to as the frequency or the number of oscillations per second of this particular wave. There is of course a related area known as the quality of sound, but that we will talk of later on. Of course, this audio frequency that we are talking of must be in the range which we can hear, which is between 20 Hz and 20,000 Hz. Also, it must have enough amount of energy to cause a response in our ear, and this is measured in terms of decibel, something that I'll explain by the time we reach the end of our lecture. When the sound energy reaches our ear, it is linked to three different parts: the outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. What we have here, known as the pinna, is the outer ear. It is connected to a pipe or a tube or a canal known as the auditory canal that goes right inside up to our eardrum. It is this pinna, its typical shape and patterns on it, which help the sound waves to be focused or rather diverted into this auditory canal. These reach a first border of the outer ear, which obviously is the eardrum. The technical term for this eardrum is tympanic membrane. It cuts off the rest of the part of the ear from the outside. It's a tube. It has a cross section, and that cross section is as good as our finger. So that's the size of the tympanic membrane on which the sound waves go and collide. Beyond it is the middle ear. This middle ear consists of three bones. These, by the way, are the smallest bones in the human body. Their technical names are malleus, incus, and stapes. The first looks like a hammer, the second like an anvil, and the third like the stirrup. And so naturally they are called the hammer, anvil, and stirrup because of their shapes. They are linked or touching or in contact with each other, and what they do is the vibrations that come from the eardrum are magnified or amplified to a small extent, and they are passed on to the next part. This is their first function, but there is an equally important function along with this. They are said to be the ones that result into impedance matching. This is a term actually from electronics, but what it does really is that the amount of energy that enters our ear could be pretty high because of the pressure and so forth, and if it directly reaches your innermost part of the ear, it could damage things. So what has to be done is that pressure issue has to be kept a little aside, and these vibrations are the ones that are to be transmitted right through. So this part isolates the pressure area and passes on only the vibrations further. Even in many electronic devices, this is what happens. The very high voltage and power surges outside are prevented from entering smaller devices like this microphone, for example, and that is associated with what is known as impedance matching. So that's what these bones really do. And the last one, the stirrup, gets in contact with a circularly patterned organ. It is known as the cochlea. It's more like a shell of a snail. It is technically known as the organ of Corti. It's more like a shell, as I said, and at one end there are certain fibers, hair like, in the form of bundles, which respond to higher frequencies, and as I go inwards there are ones which respond to lower frequencies. Within this organ of Corti there is also a fluid, and this fluid too has two functions. The first function is to pass on the vibrations that are coming from the three bones through the liquid to the hair-like structures that are there, or the bundles that are there. And because of these vibrations, these hairs or bundles bend. When they bend, the charges within them, which are in the form of ions, move up and down and result into very small voltage fluctuations. Such small voltage fluctuations are typically known as impulses. They are passed on to nerves, so naturally these are known as nerve impulses. There is a second aspect associated with this fluid, and that is equally important for all of us. Realize that all of us can decide on our own how to remain vertical, and that is because the liquid inside is horizontal, touching two sides. If I bend my head on either sides, or I get tilted due to some reason, the liquid level inside tends to remain horizontal, but the body has changed its shape, so it touches different parts of the organ of Corti. The result is we get a sensation that we are inclined in some manner, and so the body tends to rectify itself or correct itself to its natural vertical position that we are used to. If by some reason we start spinning around, there is an additional force on our body which is typically known as the centrifugal force, because of which the fluid inside starts flowing to one side, and so its pattern or shape of the surface changes, and we get a feeling that we are not really vertical. We start feeling dizzy, and that dizziness continues as long as the liquid level remains inclined. So deciding on the plane of orientation of the human body is done by this liquid that is inside. Then when these small fibers or hair bundles start bending, as I told you, there is naturally an impulse produced, and the different bundles respond to different frequencies and their combinations, and this is what results into the nerve impulse that I talked of. So the original sound wave that came in was converted to vibrations, and has now become a nerve impulse. And which is the nerve? Naturally, this nerve is known as the auditory nerve because it is related to sound. It reaches our brain stem somewhere here, and from there it passes on to the primary auditory cortex. That's the part of the brain where the information is interpreted into the sound that you are hearing even just now. So, this is how sound finally from its source enters your brain and is interpreted correctly in the form of different words. I also told you probably in my last lecture that it is this human brain which is extremely evolved, and that is the one that can interpret different words and associated meanings along with it. Animals can only hear sounds. We can understand the sound that is being produced. We can know what it means. So that's a gift to us by the very process of evolution. But then if one ear is there, what's the need of the second one? And that brings us to one more very important issue associated with sound. The word that we commonly know of is stereo, and that's the type of music that we often hear. But there is something more to it. Realize that sound, as I told you last time, travels at roughly around 330 meters per second at 0 degrees, or around 340, 345, 350 depending upon the temperature. So many meters per second. That's pretty fast. But still, if sound is coming from this side, it enters my ear, and the sound from the other side enters my ear here. Or this sound then travels all the way around and reaches this point. So naturally there is a time lag between the impulse that is produced, and the brain can decide that the wave coming from this side is slightly earlier than the wave coming from this side. So naturally the source of sound must be on this side. So even if my eyes are closed, by just listening to the sound I can tell the direction from which the sound is coming. And this is true for all animals also. So if the position of the object begins to change, without looking you can determine where and how the object is moving. This is the advantage of stereoscopic or stereo sound that we hear. So naturally, if there is a whole bunch of musical instruments, sound coming from different instruments can be sensed to be coming from different areas. We will go into more details of this when I start talking on music. Naturally, some animals can not only listen to sounds but can also orient their ears to a small extent, and that helps in determining the direction and position of the objects. Bats, dogs respond to high frequencies. Snakes can respond to infrasound or low frequencies. And animals underwater, what about them? Fish or other aquatic animals or whales. These are all animals that are capable, their ears are capable of listening to sound even underwater. We are not adapted to listening to sound underwater. So we will not be able to distinguish between the sounds that are produced underwater. Then there are going to be natural problems that arise due to hearing problems. One of them is that if one of the ears is not functioning, then naturally you are going to hear with only one of them. So naturally that sense of direction is lost. If I close my eyes and if my ear this side is not working, then for me sound coming from anywhere is all the same, because it is going to reach only one point. So if my mobile starts ringing, I can just look around but I will not be able to determine where the phone is. I need somebody else to help me out who has both the ears functional, who can decide on the direction of the sound. And if both the ears are not functional, then of course you will not be able to respond to any sound. There is an inherent problem in this. There are some people who are born deaf. For them, they have heard no sound at all. And so for them, speech becomes a problem, because they have never heard any of the spoken words. So they do not know whether the sound that they produce corresponds to A, B, C, K, Kh, G and so forth. A, E, and so forth. So they cannot distinguish that sound. So a born deaf person is also speech impaired. They have to just listen, they have to see people pointing out and saying that the words that they are pronouncing are right or wrong, and that's how they learn languages. And it's a very difficult process. Most of them have their language skills to a lower level because of this. There is another problem. Sometimes what happens is, in spite of all quiet around, you start hearing sounds in your ear, and this is a drawback known as tinnitus, in which people at higher ages invariably hear a humming sound or a sharp sound somewhere that is at background of everything. It's an age related issue which can never be cured. So these are some of the basic problems that we have with our ears. We need to take care of them. And then I did mention that I would talk of the amount of decibel concepts that are talked of so much nowadays. It is associated with the intensity of sound energy. I'll get into a bit of technical words in the beginning. Realize that energy is measured in terms of joule, and the amount of energy that falls per second becomes joule per second, which is known as watt. And so kilowatts and watts are units of the energy that is incident on any object per second. But then you also need to know how much concentration of this energy is. So if there is an area so much, X amount of energy falls on it. If the area is bigger and the same X falls, the intensity of sound there would become less. So what I need to measure is how many watts of energy falls per centimeter squared or per meter squared and so forth. Realize that this then gives you the intensity, and this intensity concept is applicable even in case of light. We will come to that when we start talking of light. Right now let's stick to sound. So number of watts per centimeter squared gives the intensity of sound, or joules per second per centimeter squared gives us the intensity of sound. So I have the quantity. The people who first measured it and decided on a unit for it were the people from Bell Labs, and they named the unit after Alexander Graham Bell. This is somewhere around 1920s, and it was originally, the unit was designed for the signal loss in telephone cables and circuits, but it became so common and so important a part that everything later on associated with measurement of intensity of sound was talked in terms of this unit called Bell. The smallest amount of energy that a human ear can detect and notice is treated as 0 Bell, and the loudest sound nowadays that is commonly talked of that human beings respond to are the jets that are taking off. If you are close by on the runway, the sound that you hear there is approximately 14 Bell. So the range is from 0 Bell up to 14 Bell. Things are not that simple. When I go from 1 bell to 2 bell, the sound energy has increased, intensity has increased tenfold. So when I go to 3 bell, it has gone to 100-fold. 4 bell, it is that 1 0 more. So by the time I reach 14 bell, it is 1 followed by 14 zeros times more than the lowest sound that you can hear. 10 raised to 14, that makes it 10,000 billion. That is the amount of times the sound that is heard. Such a big range, it's just too big. So what do? You cut down and use a different type of measuring process, and this is known as log scale. That's one way of simplifying things. So when I say 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, I am talking of 1 to 10 to 100 to 1000. But I am reducing it down to 1, 2, 3, 4. So things are becoming simpler. Earthquakes are measured in the same manner. That is the Richter scale. That's also a log scale. Wind speeds are measured in the same manner, which is known as the Beaufort scale. That's again a log scale. But things still don't become very simple. So they said this bell is a little too complicated. Let's break it down a little further. So make it into 1/10 of a bell. And that is typically referred to as a decibel. So sound intensity is invariably measured in terms of decibel. All this small part that I talked of could get a little complicated if you're not really from science. Let's keep that aside. Let's try and understand what decibel is in simple words. The smallest sound that you can hear, a good normal human being can hear, is treated as 0 decibel. Very calm breathing is around 10 decibel. If it's a quiet room, the sound intensity there is around 20 to 30 decibel. If you are in a theater that is very quiet, the value could be around the same, that is around 30 to 40 decibel. If you are having a light conversation with someone, then the sound level is 40 to 60 decibel. If it's a heavy traffic, very heavy traffic, then it is between 80 to 90 decibel. Remember, it's not just saying that you are going from 40 to 50 to 60 to 70 to 80. It's going much, much faster, multiplying 10 times, 100 times, 1000 times, 10,000 times, and so forth. Keep that in mind. And nowadays you have those jackhammers that are used to crush roads and break open concrete and other stuff. The sound that you hear, that rattling sound, heavy one, that's close to around 100 decibel. And as I said, jet engines that are around 120 decibel. Even crackers that are used in Diwali and other times have a sound restriction, and you are told that you cannot have crackers more than about 90 to 95 decibel because the pressures and the sound intensity could damage your ears. Damage? How much? So the maximum amount of exposure that your ear can bear without getting permanently damaged is what must also be known to all of us. And that changes very rapidly depending upon how loud the sound is. We hear these loud music being played at different places. Invariably, these are at a very high level, between 90 to 100 decibel. And these are damaging to your ears. Very high volume even in the headphones could cause your permanent damage to your ears. 100 decibel sound, maximum you can hear is 2 hours. Anything beyond that and your ears are permanently damaged. 120 decibel sound can be borne by a human being for not more than 2 to 5 minutes. Anything beyond that and there is a permanent damage. So please remember this, and these are the aspects that we must take care of. We must not expose our ears to too much of energy for too long a time. In theaters, the sound levels are 30 when it is very quiet, and up to about 90 decibel when the music goes very high. And the number seems to be only going from 30 to 90, but that's from 3 bell to 9 bell, and 3 to 9 the number of zeros has increased by 6. So the sound level is 1,000,000 times higher than the quiet theatre. So think of the trouble your ear is undergoing. So please be cautious. Take care of this beautiful instrument that is there with us, a pair of them. May God give you the pleasure of listening to music and good thoughts all along, all your life. If you have liked whatever I have said, please like and subscribe to this channel. Understand the importance of your hearing tool, the sense organ called the pair of ears that we have. Tell your friends about it. Till we meet next time, talking on some other related issue, either in sound or a similar area. Till we meet again. Namaskar.